Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 16. Dumpy, Tales from the Bar 2. Shisha's tall ears quivered as they stood straight up over her head.
Of course the humans intend to take over. Did you not hear what they did in the council chambers? Had the entire cohort of ambassadors ready to riot against the Exaltant. Mark my words, we will all be bowing to human overlords soon, if the Exaltant don't protect us.
Glendius the Ruxa shook his head at the rabbit-like Gorful. The fear coming off the woman made him want to crinkle his nose, but he smiled toothily at her instead as he answered,
Nah, not going to happen. Not because they couldn't, they could, don't get me wrong. They are strong, smart, and capable enough to do so, but they won't.
Fendar turned to face the Ruxa, the black-blue chitin of the Beetha's exoskeleton gleaming in the light as he spoke.
Okay then, Glendius, put your money where your whiskers are. If the humans are so strong, smart, capable and all of that, then answer me one question, why haven't they just taken over?
Glendius leaned back in his chair, grabbed his still full glass, and stared into it while he swirled the liquid around. His whiskers quivered slightly before he answered,
You ever spent any time with a human?
Fendar clicked his mandibles.
Oh, I have known plenty of humans. Companionable fellows. Chatty, even buy a guy a drink just to be friendly. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean to say anything bad about him. Got nothing against him even. Everyone I have met was pretty chill actually. Even a bit overcautious, sometimes when they move around. In fact, they are almost friendly to a fault. Hardly the nightmare deathstalkers people keep making them out to be. Hell, I doubt most of them couldn't hurt a non-sapient animal, even if they wanted to, much less attack an actual person from the over-exaggerated care they take moving around. I would even bet they are pretty fragile.
Glendius shook his head and ticked the clefts of his upper lip in annoyance.
Well, you didn't directly answer the question I actually asked, but your ignorance answered it well enough. I have spent real time with the humans. Well, with a human. He was on the engine room team with me for over a year. Yep. Short, slow, no hair on his head, and weak for a human. Which means he actually had to strain a little when a Type 4 cartonator nearly fell off a pallet and pinned a Findle. That thing weighed at least 4 times what you do, Fender, but he stood there and kept it from falling on the little gal long enough for her to get past her fear response and move. He then carefully lowered it to the ground, gave me a dumb look, shrugged, and, when we tried to express awe at his feat of strength, played it off with comments about the thing wasn't that heavy, and he should have been able to lift it. Lift it? A Type 4, barehanded. But that was Dumpy for you. Yes, Dumpy, that's what we called him, if I'd known more when we gave him that nickname, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We were the battle team for the engineering deck, and I was foreman. Being the battle team, we had a few rough and tumble types, including 2 Zoltans, and then there was the human. He was not like the humans you usually see. He was quiet. I think I can count on my hands the number of times I heard him utter more than 20 syllables at once. He was shorter than most of them, had no hair on his head, and always moved with even more exaggerated care than most humans I have encountered. So, us bunch of hardened battle team engineering techs thought the slow, quiet human was hilarious, and he sort of became butt of all the jokes, all the humor, everything else. He put up with it without protest. I swear, I never heard of even the most forgiving Findle who was so tolerant. He generally just laughed with us and went back to what he was doing.
Fendar shook his head and swept an arm through the air.
Wait, you have spent the last hour defending all the claims about human strength, natural battle prowess, and on, yet your one example of a human allowed himself to be called Dumpy. I think you are putting us on, friend. If you expect me to buy the next round, you have to do better than that.
Glendius felt his ears flatten against his head at the challenge, and shook his head ruefully.
I am getting there. Have some patience. My point is that Dumpy was the gentlest, quietest, most unassuming human you could ever hope to meet, which is important to my point. You see, there was an incident, a defining moment when I learned just how much we had been playing with fire and that we weren't, all at the same time. Being that we were the battle team, every one of us was from a race that evolved on at least a Class 7 world, but most were from higher than that. That ship ran on the outskirts of civilized space, and we actually saw action occasionally, so the captain wanted people who were less likely to freeze in a crisis. Anyway, we had 2 Zoltans on the team, nasty pieces of work, even for his Zoltans. Their homeworld may only be a Class 9.9, but to hear them talk, you'd think it was a full-on death world, maybe even higher than a 10. They picked on everyone occasionally, swaggered around like they owned the deck, and their favorite target was Dumpy. I never could figure out if they were trying to get a rise out of him, or trying to get him to show fear, like the rest of us did, but they never got anything out of him but laughter. Dumpy was just that kind of guy. Anyway, I'm the lead for our team, and one day we are in the engine room standing a half watch, because you only stand half watches when you are the battle team in order to maintain battle readiness, and a Feindel comes in. Cute little guy, every feather in place, the eyes on either side of his head constantly twitching to focus on anything that moved. You know how they are. He was one of the lowest ranking members of the regular engineering teams. So, we are running battle drills, because that is what you do on the half watch, and this guy has remembered he left one of his tools under his usual seat. He comes in amongst us as if he belonged there while we are shouting orders, responses, dealing with simulated damage, and impossible demands from the simulated captain. The Feindel has his head down, totally not paying attention. He goes over to what had to be his usual station and ducks under the chair to grab whatever he thought he'd left behind. I don't even remember anymore. So he gets under the chair, totally unnoticed, and his tail feathers tickle the Exultan sitting there. The guy starts, jumps clear out of his chair, and reflexively comes down with his claws out. Well, the young Feindel does what most civilized folk would do after seeing someone jump high in the air and a good ways backward. He giggled at the Exultan, who was in the middle of battle simulation, which wasn't going well, and the Exultan had just given a prey-like reaction in front of his fellows. The guy's buddy laughed at him, and that was the last of it. He snarled at his friend, his eyes went red, he turned on the Feindel and advanced. Then he started yelling at the little guy, about embarrassing him, being weak, all that sort of posturing. His body moved to stand in front of the ship's comm, and growled when someone moved towards the weapons locker. We all froze. We knew what was coming, and knew that all of us together couldn't take them without weapon. The little Feindel had finally realized his error, and had begun to quiver, too scared to even plead for his life, so he showed fear to an advancing predator he had just mocked. He was dead on the deck, and we all knew it. The Exultan advanced slowly, stalking, clearly enjoying his target's terror. I could smell the hormones coming off both of the Exultans. Adrenaline came off them in waves. Then, Dumpy stood up, slouching as usual, and, somewhat softly, but with a voice that carried, said, "No." The aggressor didn't even turn to look, just told Dumpy to shut up. Everything about the man changed in an instant. Dumpy pulled himself to his full height, and his eyes shanked. I have tried for years to come up with a way to describe those eyes, and have tried just as hard to forget them. Those gentle, laughing eyes from our gentle, quiet Dumpy, suddenly hard as diamonds and bright as lasers. All of the soft lines in his body were gone, and he looked like a slab of stone, yet also like a coiled spring ready for release.
Glendius shook his head as if trying to clear the memory away, scanned his audience to make sure he still had their attention.
Do you know what the trouble with a species that evolved to be the most physically dangerous thing on their planet is? They have trouble recognizing danger from anything that isn't their own species. Anyway, that is my guess as to why neither of the Sultans in the room realized that our quiet, harmless Dumpy had just transformed into anything but. The one who was staring us down then turned to Dumpy, sneered, unsheathed his claws, displayed his teeth, and spoke in a voice which dripped with contempt. "Shut up and let it happen, Dumpy, or else." That, my friends and fellow sapiens, was exactly the wrong answer. Dumpy slammed his foot on the deck, and, so help me, I felt the vibration in my teeth. Dumpy then said it again, this time loudly and with force. "No." I tell you all, I have never been more afraid. I thought the smell of adrenaline was strong before, but now it flooded the compartment. Sharp, harsh it felt like a knife in my nose, and I couldn't stop myself from shaking. Both Sultan froze. The sneer came off their faces, and their claws instinctively retracted. I could smell the adrenaline from them slack off, but the odor coming from the one human was far stronger than what both of them had been together. They sensed it too, I don't know how or why, but they realized that they were in deep mortal peril. Apex predators suddenly realizing that a higher order predator was in the room. Dumpy told the one standing by the comms to hit the button. He made as if to protest, and all Dumpy had to do was shift his weight, and only a little, and then the guy couldn't hit the button fast enough. The bridge answered, and, well, Dumpy asked for a security team to deal with the situation. He then told the Zoltan to go sit on their hands in the middle of the room, and I'll be damned if both of them didn't meekly do as they were told. Have you ever seen a Sultan do anything meekly? Dumpy backed up, his hands balled into tight fists, and waited. They sent an 8-man team to deal with the Sultan, and all of them came in with their guns drawn. If I hadn't been so terrified of the coiled spring statue standing over the prisoners, I would have laughed at the looks on their faces. Looking back, the whole scene was hilarious. 8 armed men moved on 2 seated sultans. 2 guards pulled out cuffs, the rest kept their guns trained on the offenders, but the offender's attention stayed rapt on the human. One of the sultans looked at the guard when he was touched by the cuffs. He sat up straight, locked eyes with the guard, and I think he was trying to stare him down. Dumpy took a single menacing step forward. The deck shook. All eyes turned back to him. Both sultans scooted back a bit, and all but one of the guards took a single step back, but none of them dared to turn their guns on the enraged human. I tell you true, friends, that one guard, the one who didn't step back, I still count him as the bravest or dumbest being I have ever known. I still haven't decided. That was the end of the Zoltans, though. They went without the slightest protest, without swagger, and let themselves be led from the room. As soon as they were out the door, Dumpy sort of deflated. In just a few seconds, the smell of combat hormones tapered off. He slouched down, his fists opened, and his eyes went soft again. He softly padded back to his station, and I marveled at the fact that the deck no longer shook under his weight. It was then, at that moment, when I saw Dumpy go from terrible threat back to the quiet guy we had all picked on. It was at that moment I realized the answer to your question, Fender, and I see that some of you have realized it. Why? Why haven't the humans come forth and conquered us all? Why do the reports from the council chamber of the human taking over a meeting not concern me? Why do I believe that the humans have no intention of taking over? There is one, and only one, reason. Because they don't want to.